Are we all ready? Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming. It looks like we got a full house this morning. Truly a full house. Well, thank you all for coming. It's a nice spring day. I think I'd like to start today's meeting with a story. I'm a grandfather, so I'm getting to be a storyteller, I think. It's a story that takes 5 grandchildren, by the way. It's a story that starts 27 years ago. The MTA was facing a crisis that threatened its very existence, and by extension, the health of New York's regional economy. God bless you. After suffering from decades of political finger-pointing and capital starvation, one of the true wonders of the modern world was on the brink of collapse. Deferring fundamental funding decisions and capital investment until next year, and the one after that, or maybe even the one after that, had become routine. As a result, a number of other things had become routine. Track fires, derailments every 18 days, over 300 subway runs abandoned each and every day, graffiti, crime, it's too depressing to go on with the list. And much more than what the public saw, much more was at risk behind these scenes besides the fans, the pumps, signals. But it wasn't just the MTA that was at risk. As our system of buses, subways, and railroads became the symbol of urban decay, it was the riders, the workers, the school children, the elderly. It was the born and bred New Yorkers who packed up and left the Empire State, who became the victims. If this were a short story, it would have a terrific ending, because in 1982, some very, very dedicated New Yorkers, here and in the political and business communities, who knew how important MTA services were to the region, they'd figured it out, and they'd made some tough decisions around this table in City Hall and in Albany. The result is that the MTA, for all its imperfections, is arguably the governmental success story of the last generation. Service is better, service is safer, service is more reliable. So people have come back to ride our trains and buses in numbers not seen in a half a century. New York, which was left dead in 1972, is now seeing its population grow, in large measure, not completely, because of the MTA and how it works and how well it works. Now, I know what you're all thinking. You think I'm going to say there's no one willing to make those tough decisions today. But you'd all be wrong. Because what I really want to do is thank several people and groups for having the courage and the gravitas to step up and understand what is at stake in today's crisis. Many of them have done so at great risk to their personal, professional, and political careers. First, I want to thank Governor Patterson. He has been absolutely unwavering in his understanding and support of our 8.5 million riders since day one. I'd like to thank Mayor Bloomberg, who time and time again has refused to give in to irresponsible political pandering. I want to thank Assembly Speaker Silver for his acknowledgement of the plight we face, for his willingness to work through real alternative solutions. It's been no small feat for him to keep his members focused on the big picture rather than on the next day, the next week, or the next election. I also want to thank Senate Majority Leader Malcolm Smith, because I truly believe he wants to do the right thing, but has been thwarted by infighting and partisanship. And a big thank you to Dick Ravitch and the members of the Ravitch Commission, appointed by Governor Patterson, who resisted recommending the same easy way-out gimmickry that got us into this predicament in the first place. They told it like it is, even if it was what they recommended was unpopular and is unpopular. Dick gets a double thanks and a big hug from me, for this is the second time in his career that he's stuck his neck out to save the average New Yorker who rides the transit day in and day out. I want to thank many business groups who understand that for New York's economy to survive and grow today and tomorrow, that this city, this region, needs a strong MTA. The New York City Partnership, ESTA, CBC, the Building Congress, GCA, and many others, too many to name. I want to thank the strap-hanger groups who have seen this situation for what it is and have stood up for the riders' best long-term interest, even in the face of knowing that the right course may be painful in the short term. Strap-hangers campaign, PCAC, Transportation Alternatives, Tri-State Transportation Campaign, and also many others, too many to name. And I want to thank the members of the Fourth Estate. Now, how do you like that? Yes, you have watched the situation unfurl before your eyes over the last year. You have poked, probed, and investigated our story. In the end, you've reached the conclusion that the situation is exactly what we have said it is, a true crisis that cannot be solved by ourselves without causing great pain to the riding public. In the process, you more than anyone have helped make it clear that the operations at the MTA, while extraordinarily complex, are indeed transparent. And last, but surely not least, my sincere thanks goes to this board, which has deliberated in earnest for months. It's this board that has coalesced like no other board in MTA's history, doing what's right even though it may suffer the slings and arrows by those who don't fully understand or refuse to understand what's at stake here. It's truly sad that a few individuals can hold all these brave individuals hostage. For all of those who have ignored the seriousness of this matter for political gain, expediency, or partisanship. Well, I have some thoughts for them to ponder in the next few days. When this board and I recently sat through 9 public hearings, 595 public speakers, 44 hours of verbal testimony, and read through some of the 20,995 letters and emails, we heard something from our customers that was very different than what we've heard in the past. Our customers may not be 100% happy with us, but this time many clearly understood that there are other external players who have helped cause this dilemma. Many even know exactly who helped cause the situation and who should be helping solve it. And ironically, what helped them understand it was the overwhelming transparency of this organization. For years, some of our most vocal critics have made careers out of calling for more transparency at the MTA. Well, despite this continued rhetoric, to the contrary, our transparency has given them more than what they've asked for, or perhaps more than they've bargained for. It's that transparency that has exposed all the root causes of our problems. And that's why many of our customers and critics know that they are at the core of our structural deficits is a starvation diet for some of the very same folks who've abandoned us now. It includes, but most probably not all, of the internal, external, formal, and informal oversight agencies, processes that we're subject to. It's remarkable that we can get anything done with all the folks who look over our shoulders, but we do. So today, as we make a very difficult and very distasteful set of decisions, we're doing so strengthened in the knowledge that no less than the future of the MTA and the region is at stake. We have been brought to the brink of this decision-making, but we refuse to bring the system, your MTA, to the brink of disaster. My hope is that the last chapter of this story that I started telling at the beginning of my remarks will end up being written as an epic rather than a tragedy. Time will tell, but today we must act. Doug?
Yes, sir. We have a number of public speakers. They did not state the topic. I assume it's the topic du jour. And our first speaker is the Honorable Councilman David Weprin, New York City Council member, and he'll be followed by William DiCarlo, Bob Yarrow, Kevin Corbett, and Veronica Vanderpool. Councilman.
Good morning, Chairman Hemmerdinger, Executive Director Sander, and members of the MTA Board. I'm Councilman David Weprin from the 23rd District in Eastern Queens, and I also chair the City Council Finance Committee. I am here before this board to express my personal disappointment that during a time where the middle class is already finding it hard to survive in this great city and state, are going to see the hands of the MTA once again reach into their wallets. The last thing we as New Yorkers need is for our transit system, the choice of transportation for nearly 55% of commuters and most famous mass transit system in the world, to begin down a slippery slope as to the past. The MTA must reward the passengers who showed them infinite patience and loyalty when the New York City transit system was experiencing its darkest hours during the 1980s, as well as those passengers who had to endure the last transit strike. Back in 2007, I testified before this board when there was another proposed rate hike. I challenged the MTA to think of new and innovative ideas for raising much-needed revenue. In 2007, I suggested the MTA look at raising prices for advertising in the trains, buses, and subway stations, even selling more advertising space on the back of Metro cars. I am glad to see that some of the subway cars have been fitted to display advertising on the outside of train cars, a step in the right direction, but more needs to be done. For example, paring down an MTA administrative costs and imposing fiscal discipline within the MTA. Charging tolls on the East River bridges, as recommended by the Ravitch Commission, are neither new nor innovative and not the answer to the problem. A payroll tax, also proposed by the Commission, is one way of generating additional revenue, but we must be careful not to push businesses out of this city. Instead of waiting for Albany to act, the MTA should also be pursuing help from the federal government. With the new administration in place, the MTA should be talking closely with the Obama administration to try to secure money to help the MTA alleviate the already taxed commuters of New York City. I want to ask you not to raise MTA fares. Instead, I ask this board to make a promise that if the MTA receives additional funding, whether it be through the state or federal government or through some of the aforementioned recommendations, that you promise, if you do vote a fare increase, to rescind that fare hike. I push to make fare hikes the last resort option on the table, and I believe we still have not reached that point yet. The city is doing its part in weathering through this tough economic time. The MTA must do its part. The MTA needs to be part of the solution, not the problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilman. Next speaker is William DiCarlo, followed by Bob Yarrow.
Good afternoon. Good morning. Good morning. My name is William DiCarlo. I'm Assistant International Representative of the TCU, Board 167, and local chairman of Lodge 177. Lodge 177 represents the ticket sellers at all of the Long Island Railroad train stations. I've been employed by the Long Island Railroad for over 30 years. The proposed closing of the 20 ticket offices has a far greater impact than merely asking the customers who utilize those clerks to find another way to get their tickets. The last time the Long Island Railroad closed stations, the impact was clear. The first thing to diminish was customer service. The ticket clerks are the eyes and the ears that make the riding public feel safe to use that particular station. Without them, only the occasional station cleaner for a few minutes each day will be the only MTA employee on the property. There is an increase in vandalism to the MTA property and to the customers' automobiles. When the ticket clerk is removed from the station, undesirables begin to find out there's no one there to throw them out. Word spreads in the community and they begin to live in the stations. When customers see this, they shy away from using the station facilities. The next thing that happens is that newsstands change from a thriving business to some poor foreigners sitting on a milk crate with a few stacks of newspapers shivering in the cold. This process has been repeated time and time again. How much lost rent is the MTA real estate losing every month from the past and now proposed station closings? Surrounding businesses fail and the revenue is lost to the villages, towns, counties, and state and taxes. All this ultimately leads to less money for the MTA's budget. We lose our occasional riders to their cars every time they come to stations and no one's there to assist them, and they either miss their train trying to purchase a ticket or get off the line ahead of them and pay $5 onboard fare for each customer. On weekend, the city's own fare goes from $3.25 to $8 on board. The machines at all of the Long Island Railroad stations have been moved to the outside of the station buildings for the convenience of the customers. Now during inclement weather, the customers are forced to stand out in the rain and cold to purchase their tickets. When the touchscreens get wet or frozen by the elements or lose their calibration due to dirt, they're virtually useless. The increased use at the machines at the stations proposed to close will increase the fraudulent use of credit cards and scams as reported in Newsday.
Please summarize your
Let's do
comments.
what makes sense, not good politics. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Bob Yarrow, then Kevin Corbett, Veronica Vanderpool, George Spitz, and Marty Goodman. Bob Yarrow.
Yes, right here.
Okay.
Good morning. I'm Bob Yarrow, President of the Regional Plan Association. Because of a failure of leadership in the state Senate, we're looking at an impending train wreck. Although Governor Patterson and the State Assembly have acted to resolve this crisis, 6 Democratic senators, Senators Kruger, Espada, Diaz, Montserrat, Foley, and Johnson, are holding the state Senate and 8 million daily subway, bus, LIRR, and Metro-North passengers hostage. 8 million daily riders will face unconscionable fare increases and service cuts because of the political games being played by these irresponsible legislators. Senate Republicans also deserve blame for playing politics with the public interest by playing no part in resolving the gridlock in the Senate. Their irresponsible actions also jeopardize the livelihoods of the 14 million residents of the metropolitan region. The Senate's proposed MTA budget doesn't include a nickel for the MTA's capital program, and we know from experience what happens when we stop investing in the capital needs of this system. The system requires $2 billion a year just to maintain the trains and buses and keep them running and keep this infrastructure going, as this board knows well. So ignoring these needs will cause the system to deteriorate and bring us back to the delayed trains and deteriorating service that plagued the system in the 1960s and 70s. We can't allow this to happen. We were in Albany yesterday meeting with individual members of the Senate. We were very pleased by the meeting that we had with Speaker Silver and with representatives of the governor's office and the leadership in the Senate. And Malcolm Smith's doing everything that he can, but we've got a real serious problem here that needs to be resolved. We can't allow this train wreck to occur. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Yao. Kevin Corbett from ESTA, followed by Veronica Vanderpool and George Spitz.
Good morning, Chairman, Executive Director, board members. I'm Kevin Corbett, co-chair of Empire State Transportation Alliance, a diverse coalition of business, civic, environmental, labor organizations that are committed to supporting New York's transportation needs. We recognize today's action is necessary. Obviously, the crisis is real. You have an obligation to retirees who hold your bonds, and they need the assurances that your finances are solid. Despite the necessity of today's action, we still call on the state legislature not to starve us back to the days of service cuts, breakdowns that undermine commerce and the future of the city itself. While there is always room for improvement at the MTA, like any organization, the fact is the MTA operates the world's largest transit system 24/7 by and large effectively moving millions of riders every day. The Ravage Plan is a comprehensive plan that we have supported. It is coherent in addressing both the operating and capital needs that have been well vetted in a public process. It is balanced in distributing the burden between riders, drivers, and businesses. While there may be room for tweaking different things, the days for using that as an excuse for not taking action have long passed. Starving the system will lead us back to the days of further cuts in service, more frequent breakdowns, and the kind of actions that Bob spoke of that will drive out businesses, tourists, and residents from the region. Rather than funding the capital plan needed to maintain and expand the system, which provides much-needed jobs that we could certainly use right now, the MTA and construction industries are looking at layoffs that are being necessitated by today's action. There appear to be some legislators who believe that a few Band-Aids might suffice and that this issue will soon disappear from the headlines of the news. We call on their leaders to disabuse them of that idea. We assure them that we will be around and maintaining an effort to not let that happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Veronica Vanderpool, George Spitz, then Marty Goodman, and Matthew Shotkin.
Good morning. My name is Veronica Vanderpool, and I'm Associate Director for the Tri-State Transportation Campaign, a regional policy watchdog organization working for a more balanced transportation network. It is quite unbelievable that we are at this juncture today. Today, you, the MTA Board, will approve oppressive fare hikes, service cuts, and layoffs, and begin implementing these measures in June. We are urging Governor Patterson and both chambers of the legislature to come up with a plan to stop this, a plan that is balanced and equitable and prevents this drastic outcome. There are many revenue possibilities for our legislators to consider, but we are asking for a plan that balances the burden by asking drivers, transit users, and businesses to pay for transit. The Senate's plan, for example, continues to give drivers a free ride, while bus, subway, and rail riders continue to pay at least $2 to travel into Manhattan. Assembly Speaker Silver and Governor Patterson understand the burden this inequity creates for the transit user, which is why they put forth or support proposals asking all beneficiaries of our transit system to contribute to its maintenance and improvement. The Senate plan released last week does not address the long-term capital needs of the system, but instead creates a temporary fix, at best, for the operating deficit. But this is not enough. Suburban and outer borough residents are pleading for improved and expanded bus service. Subway riders on the Lexington Avenue line are calling for modernized signals that would increase train frequency and speed. Transit workers and businesses throughout the state are hoping they will still have jobs with the MTA during this frightening economic crisis. But without a plan to fund these capital needs, the forecast for all is extremely bleak. We all know someone who will be hit hard by these measures, and unfortunately, Long Island bus riders will be hit the hardest. LI bus riders will see their fares jump 75% and will be unable to use unlimited Metro cards. This proposal is deeply upsetting and should not go forward. New York City bus and subway riders will also be spending $22 more a month for less service. LIRR and Metro North users will see fares jump anywhere from 20 to 29%. Senate Majority Leader Malcolm Smith, Governor David Patterson, and Assembly Speaker Sheldon, are you really, really going to let this happen? Millions of people are relying on you and need your leadership. Thank you.
Thank you. George Spitz, followed by Marty Goodman, Matthew Shotkin, John Ferretti.
I have copies of my
Please speak into the microphone,
to
Mr.
distribute
Spitz.
to the board. I have more copies. State Senate Majority Leader Malcolm Smith's courageous holdout on the Ravitch package is justified by a Newsday statement by Sheldon Silver. On time is all relative. Obviously nothing that they, the MTA, do will go into effect for quite a while. Now, further support was to this was a 24th, March 24th editorial in Newsday, which said, the Ravitch Commission idea of payroll tax and bridge tolls is too unpopular to be politically viable. I submit that before further action is taken, a thorough examination of MTA's capital program, particularly the Manhattan mega projects, 2nd Avenue Subway, and East Side access be made. Scott Stringer, Carol Maloney, and other politicians are trying to sell the idea that the federal government is paying for all of these projects. I obtained with great difficulty tables that prove that is not the case. Now, the Delcan Corporation, which does work for the MTA, made a study of East Side access showing that by scrapping, digging a deep cavern, bringing the trains into the upper level of Grand Central Station, the potential cost savings appear to be in the order of $1.2 billion. In 1999, there's been a study available revealing the feasibility of light rail on 2nd Avenue. Cities throughout the world are using light rail to solve their problems. Toronto is spending $400 million each year to build approximately 75 miles of light rail. Transit Commission Chairman Adam Giambroni says there is still talk about subways, but in the long run, subways are about 10 times more expensive than light rail.
Please summarize your comments, Mr. Spence.
I'll wind up right at the last paragraph. The MTA should seriously consider Declan's proposal of alternate construction of East Side access, offering savings of at least $1.2 billion, and the 1999 study of light rail, which would cost no more than $500 million and would take roughly 2 years to complete, compared to the $4.6 billion for the first 1.7 miles from 96 to 63rd Street of the 2nd Avenue subway, with completion date in 2015. This would not only eliminate the requirement for additional taxes, subway, bus, and toll fares, but leave nearly $1 billion in federal and state bond issue money for much-needed light rail construction in the Douglaston, Little Neck area of Queens, Mill Basin in Brooklyn, and Alan Capelli, my friend, are you listening? The north and west shores of Staten Island. Take the money, that money, federal money that George Bush promised the East Side Reform Democrats, and use it, and let them spend $500 million on light rail. They dug from 96 to 105th Street in the 70s and stopped. You can stop the subway cavern. You can stop it again. Put light rail on 2nd Avenue, and you'll have enough money for Staten Island, Queens, Mill Basin, and Brooklyn. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Spitz. Our next speaker is Marty Goodman, then Matthew Shotkin, John Ferretti, and Eric Josephson. Mr. Goodman.
Hello, my name is Marty Goodman. I'm a station agent and TW activist. I say no to the fare hikes, no to service cuts, job cuts, and layoffs. No means no, Mr. Ravitch, Mr. Patterson, Mr. Bloomberg, and all of your six-digit labor pals. Make the rich pay. Bank bailouts are running into trillions. $165 million in bonuses went to AIG crooks with our money. Corporations double dip into the stimulus, and you still want us to pay them, the banks? The corporations who produce this crisis will be rewarded at today's meeting. We are again paying Wall Street. Working people of France got this stuff right. Last week was their second general strike in 2 months against corporate bailouts, pension cuts, and layoff threats. Over 2 million workers said enough, and 70% of the population supported them. Hear that, transit workers listening today? How's that for a stimulus package, MTA? Following spending practices established under Bill Clinton, the transportation stimulus package, after getting whacked for a few $1 billion in the White House, will go mostly toward construction costs, mainly for highways and not for mass transit operating expenses such as fare reduction or workers' salaries. Basically, it's corporate fleecing, a la the transit hub, now set to grab nearly half of the MTA stimulus. The rich want working people, riders and transit workers, to fight each other over mass transit crumbs. MTA don't count on it like Sarkozy did. 15 to 20% of the MTA budget has gone first to banks and Park Avenue loafers, mostly in payments on tax-free MTA bonds and bloated payments to brokers. The MTA debt service is $1.5 billion for 2009 rather.
Please summarize your comments.
The
Mr.
MTA
Goodman.
budget deficit is $1.2 billion and growing. This fare hike, these cuts and potential layoffs are about paying the banks. We did not create this crisis. Cancel the MTA debt to Wall Street. Let unions and riders run this system. How dare you threaten our jobs?
Please conclude,
About
Mr.
Mr.
Goodman.
Ravitch and his recommendations. He wants to end public hearings on fare hikes. This is a little commented aspect of the Ravitch recommendations. They're usually just photo ops for politicians and bureaucrats. Hearings can be a weapon of mass protest, however, against fare hikes. This undemocratic gag act will serve to insulate the fare box as a cash cow for banks and the rich. A united labor movement, city, state, and private can shut down New York City. We can't force the rich to pay.
Thank you, Mr. Goodman. Our next speaker is Matthew Shotkin, John Ferretti, Eric Josephson, and Bill Henderson, and then Gene Rushinoff.
Good morning. My name is Matt Shotkin. I'm glad that the L trains are now computer operated and controlled. It makes them run better. Also, the M15 buses are more high powered, allowing less of a chance for a breakdown, even though one did break down on Sunday, February 22nd at approximately 5 p.m. Luckily, I wasn't on it at the time. Also, the construction on the 4, 5, and 6 trains has stopped for the time being, so that those trains are now running on a regular weekday schedule, thankfully. Accessoride is no longer part of the package. I think this will help the disabled. Cost-cutting isn't smart. The MTA is raking in less money. No wonder some of the token booths at certain stations are being eliminated. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you. Next speaker, John Ferretti. And again, if you will all queue up after I call your names, that will facilitate the speakers. After John Ferretti is Eric Josephson, Bill Henderson, Gene Rushinoff, and Norman Siegel.
Hello, my name is John Ferretti. I'm a conductor on the number 1 line. I'm a member of TW Local 100 and a supporter of Revolutionary Transit Worker, a newsletter supported by the League for the Revolutionary Party. Revolutionary Transit Worker opposes any and all of the MTA's planned fare hikes, bridge tolls, service cuts, and layoffs. These anti-working class attacks are a front in the stepped-up capitalist war on workers which the spreading world depression brings. They will most hit the poor, particularly workers of color and immigrants, and are therefore racist attacks. For decades, federal, state, and city governments have cut funding to public transportation. They have encouraged the MTA to borrow from Wall Street. The MTA now pays over $2 billion a year in debt servicing. In other words, the threatened fare hikes and service cuts would take money out of the pockets of workers to save the funds of parasitic bankers and financiers. These attacks come shortly after these same banks and corporations received a massive bailout from mostly working-class tax dollars. The imperialist ruling class has created the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression, and they are united in their calls to make the working class and poor pay. Their more prominent spokesmen like Barack Obama try to hide their support for the parasites of Wall Street by calling for, quote, shared sacrifice. What they really mean is that the workers and poor must do all the sacrificing while the bosses share all the profits. Local 100 President Roger Toussaint has stated opposition to the fare hikes and service cuts, but has waged no real fight against them. The Toussaint bureaucracy has done nothing to mobilize the membership to take any active role in the fight against these attacks and has instead mounted a weak campaign in the media against the fare hikes and service cuts. The shameful silence of our union leadership is predictable because Toussaint is a pro-capitalist union leader who openly expresses his desire for partnership with the MTA bosses. In order to maintain this treacherous partnership with the bosses, Toussaint must do everything he can to keep transit workers on the sidelines as passive observers while the MTA attacks our working class brothers and sisters. That is why he and the MTA management have put our labor contract into arbitration. Now we have no right to vote on our own contract. The MTA bosses need Tucson to play this traitorous role because they fear the tremendous power of united working class struggle to stop these attacks. Transit workers cannot allow our leadership to keep us on the sidelines while our class is under racist attack.
Please conclude, Mr. Furley.
Okay, we must mobilize to stop contract arbitration. Let's vote on our contract. Arbitrators represent the capitalist state and serve the bosses despite their supposed impartiality.
Our next speaker is Eric Josephson, then Bill Henderson, Gene Rushinoff, Norman Siegel, and Patricia Dolan. Eric Josephson.
Hello. I'm also a supporter of Revolutionary Transit Worker, elected by my fellow track workers as an open revolutionary socialist, a result that the union leadership chose to ignore for 6 months. I'm here also to solidarize with what the previous speaker said, what other speakers have said, and I have a transparency request. Who does the TA owe $25 billion to? Which banks? Which insurance companies? How much money are they getting also in working class taxpayers' dollars to support them, thus getting the working class's money from two sources, from fares, from government subsidies to the TA, and from the federal government now printing money to send to them directly or indirectly. It may not be soon, but it will be certain that the working class in New York City and other cities will rise. The Transport Workers Union could show the way forward to workers all over the city, indeed all over the country and the world, as transit workers have in other countries. They could show the way to fight back, as the working class of the city and the businessmen of the city depend so thoroughly upon mass transit to get anything done. We need a leadership for the whole working class that points the way forward to this, and we can certainly start by taking matters into our own hands as workers, fighting to vote on our own contract instead of entrusting it to connivance, a fake impasse between the bosses of the TA and the leaders of the union who support them. The Revolutionary Transit Worker hopes to unite in such struggles with all workers regardless of political belief, so that we can finally show the way forward to mass workers' action against the Democratic and Republican parties who are only discussing various and sundry ways to rob the workers and make it look good.
Thank you, Mr. Josephson. Bill Henderson, PCAC, Gene Rushinoff, Strap Hangers Campaign, Norman Siegel, Civil Rights Attorney, and Patricia Dolan and Felice Farber.
Good morning. I'm Bill Henderson. I'm the Executive Director of the PCAC. We're here at a point where there are few choices remaining, but the service cuts and fare increases discussed today will result in substantial pain for the riders, some of whom face monthly commuting cost increases of over $100 for diminished service. We don't accept these fare increases, and particularly do not accept the service cuts that will likely be approved today. The economic downturn that brought these funding issues to a head came more quickly than we might have expected, but both the MTA and transit advocates have for several years warned of an approaching financial and fiscal crisis created by excessive borrowing and unreliable revenues. We've called for the establishment of stable, reliable, and inflation-sensitive funding base for public transportation in the region for several years. The good news is that it's still not too late to pull back from the brink and set the MTA's finances on the right path. Now's the time for our state-elected representatives to do what needs to be done. Transit is the lifeblood of our region. Both our economy and our way of life are dependent on keeping the public transportation system financially healthy and in good repair. We're dismayed at the little movement in Albany and the seeming unwillingness of the state Senate to face facts and face the reality of the MTA's funding needs. It's incumbent on those who reject the existing proposals in Albany to offer better alternatives and not just criticisms. If no funding package is approved in Albany, great damage will be done to riders, but also to the MTA and its operating agencies, and to the city, state, and region. We've invested decades in bringing the MTA system back from the brink. We can't afford to throw this progress away now. Reforms and adequate funding must move hand in hand. For this arrangement to succeed, the MTA must take the actions necessary to assure legislators that public funds are being spent prudently. The arrangement has to succeed because riders need the services that they rely upon to be available every day at a reasonable fare. They can't afford to wait for the state to provide necessary funding. Riders are under stress from every direction. We must at least remove the burden of crippling fare increases and draconian service cuts from their backs. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Gene Rushinoff, followed by Norman Siegel, Patricia Dolan, Felice Farber, and Joe Rappaport.
Good morning, Chairman Hemmerdinger and board members and staff. Tonight and tomorrow, subway, bus, and commuter rail riders will be digesting the awful news that's coming out of this board today in its vote. Transit fares will be shooting through the roof. Those of us who buy 30-day unlimited ride passes will see them go up an incredible $103. And for the riders on the Long Island Railroad and Metro North, you're talking about increases that range from $40 to $90, an incredible amount of money. And they get hit twice because many of them switch to the city subways and buses. At the same time, riders are going to be asked to pay this whole lot more, and they'll get in exchange a whole lot less. Among the horrendous service cuts you have before you today are eliminating or shortening 5 subway lines, getting rid of 20 bus routes, incredible 20 bus routes, and eliminating hundreds of station agents and increasing waiting times and crowding throughout the system. And in addition to all of this bad news, at the same time, after 25 years and $75 billion, your capital program for fixing the system will be thrown into an uncertain future. I'd like to ask the protesters in the room to hold up their signs. It's still not too late for Albany to come to the rescue. These devastating service cuts and fare hikes cannot stand, must not stand. And this cannot be the end of the story. We look to Governor Patterson and his leadership to work with the state legislative leaders, Malcolm Smith and Shelley Silver, to come up with a safe, decent, and affordable plan for safe, decent, and affordable transit. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Norman Siegel, followed by Patricia Dolan, Felice Farber, Joe Rappaport, Mary Barber, Kenneth Barr, and then our last speaker is Richard Kessel.
Good morning. I am here this morning to request that you do not vote to increase fares and or cut services. I am a card-carrying member of the MTA Transit Club, usually a monthly member, and one who regularly uses the A, B, C, D, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines. I'm curious as to how many of you use the trains or buses regularly. By a show of hands, how many board members regularly use the trains or buses? Well, I hope someday everyone here raises their hands. If you go ahead with the cuts and fare increases, it will just be another reason as to why we have to come to the painful conclusion that Governor Nelson Rockefeller's experiment in creating the super agency MTA most likely has failed, and is probably now time to restructure it. Perhaps we should have public elections to determine who sits on the board, or perhaps stating in the law that the board is required to reflect the diversity of the MTA's constituency. Looking at who is in this room, you clearly don't represent the diversity of the city or even the state. Perhaps we need to spin off the New York City Transit Authority from the MTA. Perhaps, like in the judicial system, an informa pauperis category needs to be created for New Yorkers who legitimately can't afford these fare increases in times of an economic downturn. Perhaps on June 1, 2009, we, the people who ride the trains and buses, need to engage in a one-day boycott to demonstrate to you and the elected officials that we aren't going to take it anymore. And I put that in last night before Mayor Bloomberg said that. Mayor Bloomberg and I agreeing on something. That is unusual in and of itself. And to show our potential economic and political power, and perhaps on the night of June 1, thousands of us will participate in 100 town hall neighborhood meetings in order to discuss a new plan for a new transit system structure that will be more efficient than the current one.
Please conclude your remarks, Mr. Siegel.
You say I should conclude?
Please.
Okay. With due respect, Mr. Chair, your opening statement was Alice in Wonderland. Thank you very, very much.
Our next speaker, Patricia Dolan, then Felice Farber, and Joe Rappaport. Ms. Dolan.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Patricia Dolan. I'm the director of Queens Connection, a program of the Queens Community House, which for more than 30 years has pioneered services for older New Yorkers in Queens. I'm speaking as well for the MTA's Senior Citizen Advisory Committee, which the MTA organized more than 20 years ago as a voice for seniors who are among the authority's most steadfast customers. The fare increases and service reductions you will vote for later this morning will disproportionately affect seniors who are New York Transit's core surface ridership during off-peak hours. The routes you will completely eliminate seem to serve neighborhoods with especially large concentrations of older residents. Although according to the daily media and to the material that you distributed earlier this morning, you're proposing not to double the rates for Access-a-Ride, it is unclear that you are not, in fact, seeking permission and authority from the federal government and a waiver from the New York City mayor to do so. You must understand, for seniors who use Access-a-Ride and for disabled people who rely on it, Access-a-Ride is not a ride. It's a very hard way of getting around the city. Doubling the Access-a-Ride fare, the full fare, to $5 a trip is indefensible. According to your original budget documents, your reason for doing this wasn't so much to increase your revenue as to decrease ridership. People who ride Access-a-Ride don't do so because they want to. They do so because if they don't, they're going to be stuck at home, isolated with everything that goes along with that. It's time for you to redeem yourselves this morning and state unequivocally for the riders who use Access-a-Ride, for their friends, for their neighbors and their families, that you do not intend, now or ever, to seek to double the fare for these poor, needy, disabled people. I have petitions signed from more than 1,000 people who use Access-a-Ride, and I'm submitting this along with my testimony. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker, Felice Farber, General Contractors Association, followed by Joe Rappaport, Mary Barber, Kenneth Barr, and then our last speaker, Richie Kessel.
Good morning. I'm Felice Farber, the Director of External Affairs for the General Contractors Association. We're a trade association representing the heavy construction industry in New York. I feel like today is Groundhog Day. We're back here again. Unfortunately, the state legislature still hasn't gotten it right. Today is a sad day for all New Yorkers. As the board prepares to vote for a budget that gives us less for more, we can thank our legislative leaders in Albany. Senate Majority Leader Malcolm Smith, Senate Minority Leader Dean Skelos, Assembly Speaker Sheldon Silver, and Governor Pattison have failed to come to an agreement on a stable and sustainable revenue stream that funds the MTA. The Governor and the Ravitch Commission came up with a plan, the Assembly modified that plan, and the State Senate is stuck with no practical resolution and no compromise. The economy is tough for every New Yorker, yet every Senate Republican and some Democrats oppose the Ravitch plan, choosing instead to put politics ahead of what's best for their constituents. It is the same old story of how in Albany political opportunism comes first, the people come second. The lack of legislative action will hurt millions of commuters and cost thousands of construction jobs. We are saddened for the fate that all New Yorkers will suffer. With the planned shrinkage of the MTA, the Big Apple, unfortunately, will become a shriveled prune. Workers concerned about whether they even have a job will now have to pay much more to get to work, $22 more for a monthly unlimited ride card, and perhaps $100 or more for a monthly commuter ticket. Without a funding stream for the MTA capital plan, construction workers worry whether they will even have a job. GCA members have already laid off 2,000 workers, and an additional 30,000 to 40,000 more job losses are expected with the cutback in public spending. The state legislature should be taking action now that stimulates the economy, not destroys it. We hope it is not too late, and we call on the governor and the state legislature to reach a compromise that quickly comes up with a sufficient revenue stream to fund the MTA operating deficit and the next capital plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker, Joe Rappaport. Joe Rappaport. Not hearing a response. Oh, there he goes. Representing the City Controller's Office.
Good morning. I'm Joe Rappaport of the New York City Controller's Office, and I'm reading a statement from Controller Thompson. This is a defining moment for our city, region, and state. Our vast bus and subway network, in spite of its many frustrations, is the envy of other cities in our nation who live and die by the automobile. Our financial health, and for that matter, the health of everyone in the region, depends on safe, reliable, and effective transit. Yet our leaders in Albany and City Hall failed to fund the MTA adequately for more than a decade. These leaders now appear to have failed thus far to solve this latest deep crisis, which has been caused by great losses in revenue and the towering debt they themselves imposed on transit riders. Now you, the MTA Board, must vote on a plan of fare hikes and draconian service cuts that everyone knows make no sense for our city or our region. And beyond that, the vital MTA capital program is at risk. This all makes it harder for us to recover from the recession. This must not stand. Today, even as the board prepares to take its vote, I call on Governor Patterson, the Assembly, and the Senate to stop the clock, negotiate, and make the kind of deal that is equitable for all. It can be done. It must be done. As you know, the Controller, I have proposed a plan that parallels the Ravitch plan, including the payroll tax and a requirement that drivers pay their fair share for a system that benefits them. I offered a more equitable way of raising revenue from drivers than bridge tolls, a weight-based vehicle registration fee, which would save the MTA nearly $500 million in implementation and administrative costs alone over the next 5 years compared to tolls. To help by charging more to drivers of larger, more environmentally damaging vehicles, and most important, it would require that all drivers from across the entire 12-county MTA region would contribute to transit. Finally, I'm pleased that the MTA has wisely listened to opposition from the disability community, my office, and many other elected officials, and abandoned its unjust proposal to more than double fares for accessor riders. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker is Mary Barber, Environmental Defense Fund, and Kenneth Barr, and lastly, Richard Kessel.
Good morning. I'm with the Environmental Defense Fund, and we work in partnership with many of the organizations that you're hearing from this morning, and wish to associate ourselves with many of the comments they've said that the horror of these cuts and fare increases can't go forward. It's too important to the city and the region. And I'd just like to say quickly this morning is to call on our legislative leaders in Albany. I call on them to put their best selves forward and to show the leadership that is needed and that has to happen, and to come together and make this work. It can work. It has to be resolved. There's no alternative. They've all acknowledged that, and we call on them to come forward and make this happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Kenneth Barr. And then our last speaker, Richard Kessel. Mr. Barr.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Sander, members of the board. Today is a day none of us in this room hoped would ever come, but it has. A lot of finger pointing has gone on. I would remind everyone that when you point one finger outward, 3 fingers point inward. The failure is collective. All of us, the entire public, has failed the public transit system. The atmosphere of political timidity reflects that of 55 years ago this month, when a television broadcaster from a studio ironically located on the main floor of Grand Central Terminal, commenting on another politician and his exploitation of political timidity, said, "They didn't create this situation of political fear, they merely exploit it." And he concluded his comments by quoting Julius Caesar, "The fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars, but in ourselves." Too much has been said about, "Don't raise my fare, don't cut my service." And not enough has been focused on how do we adequately fund the public transportation system of the Metropolitan Transportation District. The fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars. It is in ourselves. Thank you.
Our last speaker today is Richard Kessel, Natural Resource Defense Council.
Good morning. My name is Richard Castle. I'm with the Natural Resources Defense Council, of course, and I chair the Tri-State Transportation Campaign. And I'm here, of course, echoing the comments of many of my colleagues in the Empire State Transportation Alliance. Given that I'm the last speaker, I'll try not to repeat much of what has been said and try to come up with at least a few seconds of something new. But the news isn't new. We're here again, once again. Albany is not coming through. This year, it's the Senate's turn. Albany is not coming through to provide what we need to avoid the fare increase, the service cuts, and to put the MTA on a long-term road towards meeting the capital needs of the coming decade. We know what this means economically to the city and to the region. We know how important it is to the economics and the livelihoods of millions of us in the region. Others have spoken far more eloquently than I can on that topic. So I'm going to do what an environmentalist does, and I'm going to take 30 seconds to talk about an environmental issue that I think is important to remember here. NRDC is an environmental group. We listen carefully to the messages coming from Washington. And what's the message coming? The President is saying over and over again, energy and climate is at the heart of some of our most pressing future needs. We need to cut greenhouse gas emissions 80% by 2050. To do that, we need to cut gasoline demand in the transportation sector by 90%. To do that, we need to invest in our regional transit, our city transit systems, and we need to do it for the long haul. That's not an abstract issue in New York City. It's a very real day-to-day issue in New York City. It's critical that as we turn past today's vote and towards the action in Albany in the next few weeks, the next few months, that we do what we can to get this fare rolled back if it goes through, to get the service cuts restored if they go through, and to get the MTA's long-term capital needs in place for years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kessel. You are our 19th and last speaker today. That concludes today's public speaking session.
Thank you very much, Doug. Can I please have approval of last month's meeting that have been distributed to all of our members? Are there any corrections or omissions?
Move it.
Second. All in favor? So moved. Lee?
Thank you, Dale. This is an extremely difficult day for everyone. Our 8.5 million daily customers, the 70,000 men and women who work for the agencies of the MTA, and anyone who cares deeply about the vitality and future of the city and the region. The fare increases and service cuts that the board must approve today are the only major tools Albany has given the board to operate the transit system and keep those operations in the black. There are no other moves in the board's playbook. Believe me, neither the board nor the senior staff of the MTA would be advancing these measures if we had any other choice. As many of you know, the precarious position that the MTA finds itself in today did not materialize overnight or merely in the last year. It was good to hear that a number of our speakers acknowledged that as well. The gap in our operating budget and the absence of stable, recurring resources to support the 2010 to 2014 capital program reflect a confluence of adverse forces. Decisions made early in the decade to put the 2000 to 2004 capital program on a credit card and the ravages of this deep recession. This global recession, the toughest challenge our nation has faced since the Great Depression, has decimated the MTA's revenue from transactional taxes, revenues that rise, plateau, and fall with the economy. Transit systems across the country, sadly, are facing the same crisis. When I returned to the MTA in 2007, I saw the danger that this confluence of forces represented, and I took a series of actions to tighten the MTA's belt, even though no one saw the depth of this economic crisis coming, and I appreciate the support that you all gave me in doing that. Despite carrying a surplus in 2007, deficits were looming due largely to the ballooning debt service from the 2000 to 2004 capital program. We took immediate action to become more efficient in the face of these widening gaps. Each agency was directed to take 6% cuts over 4 years. As the breadth and depth of this recession came into focus, we expedited that cost-cutting schedule and ordered that the 6% cuts be accomplished in 3 years and not 4. Early in 2007, we took the first steps toward the type of institutional changes that take time to implement but have already begun to generate recurring savings. We integrated the MTA's 3 bus companies and eliminated 24 positions. The introduction of general managers in the subway system, which improves customer service and operational performance, also allowed us to cut 70 positions, an entire layer of management. And we have begun to operate our business service center, which will consolidate back office functions from all the MTA agencies, saving $30 to $40 million annually and eliminating 259 positions when fully implemented, about 40% of the administrative forces that we have to perform these functions. When we presented the preliminary financial plan in July 2007, it included a cost of living fare increase so that our billion-dollar surplus could be used to pay down debt and help reduce the widening deficit we are dealing with today. If this board had not made that wise decision then, our problem would be considerably worse. As the economy worsened in 2008, the MTA took an additional approximately 5% across-the-board cut, with at least 5% of managerial costs cut at each agency. New York City Transit alone cut 7.5% of its managerial expenses, a savings of more than $20 million annually. That is on top of the savings I referred to before. In the end, though the collapse of our real estate tax revenue, on top of the escalating debt service costs, could not be made up by belt tightening. Only 7% of the MTA's $11 billion budget is dedicated to administration, making it simply impossible to cut our way out of what amounted to a $1.2 billion deficit. In essence, we could eliminate all the managers and administrative staff in the entire MTA, and we would not fill this operating deficit, not to speak of funding our capital program. Perhaps the worst news has come over the past few months as real estate tax revenues continue to slip. As we reported on Monday, those revenues are already more than $120 million behind budget this year. What if this deterioration in revenues continues? Even with today's fare increase and service cuts, we may have to reforecast our annual revenues as early as next month and identify further savings to deal with hundreds of millions of dollars in new deficits. In light of these circumstances, Governor Patterson appointed the Ravitch Commission last April. The governor knew then that the MTA would need new, reliable, recurring sources of funding to put the network of services on stable fiscal ground in the years and decades ahead. When the Ravitch Commission reported back to the governor in December, its recommendations identified recurring revenue sources that would be robust enough to eliminate the MTA structural deficit and fund our $30 billion capital program, including the $22 billion it takes to meet the normal replacement needs and the state of good repair needs of the existing infrastructure. Over the past months, you've heard me talk extensively about the importance of the capital program and how a fully funded plan is necessary to keep us from sliding back to disorder and dysfunction of the 1970s and 1980s. And again, we're heartened that many of the speakers referred to that as well. Today, we are rapidly approaching a rare moment of truth, not just for our customers, but for the future of this region's economy and its livability. You cannot create the 21st century New York we all want to inhabit without funding the MTA in a way that meets our customers' needs and the needs of future generations of New Yorkers. New York State has a deep reservoir of ingenuity. Just look at our history over the last 400 years. It's full of examples of innovation and resilience. So I remain optimistic. I hope that the state legislature will soon reach agreement on a plan that not only helps us avert the fare and toll increases and service cuts, but also provides a long-term solution to the MTA's operating capital needs. Despite what some have said about the MTA in the heat of this debate, no one wants to wipe out the extraordinary progress that has been made here over the past 25 years, progress achieved through a $76 billion investment in state of good repair projects for our subways, buses, and commuter rail, the 50% increase in ridership we've experienced since 1996 is unprecedented and was simply unthinkable to anyone who used the system in the early 1980s. As Dale just mentioned, the MTA network is more reliable than ever. Our finances are as transparent as any agency in the country, and we are poised to help lead the region's recovery if we receive the long-term investment our customers and our infrastructure deserve. We hope the state legislature will act soon to make this a reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Okay, we got a lot of business to do today. So, today, in accordance with the 2009 budget we adopted in December, the board must act on proposed fare and toll increases and on additional actions for budget balance, including major service changes. These action items are necessitated by the statutory requirement that the MTA operate on a self-sustaining basis. It means a balanced budget. Complete descriptions of the proposed fare and toll increase and service changes are found in the Fare and Toll Increase book. Complete descriptions of the proposed major service changes are found in the AABB Major Service Change book provided separately to the board. Those books include the staff summaries and resolutions describe the proposed actions before the board. Are we ready, ladies and gentlemen? Fare and toll action items. Authorization for fare increases. The first matter requiring the board's action is a proposed fare increases. More precisely, the board adoption is sought of the resolution on page 3 of the Fare and Toll Increase book. Adoption of this resolution will allow the MTA agencies to implement tariff changes described in Attachment A to the resolution. The proposed changes will increase the fares charged to New York City Transit, the commuter rails, and the rest of the operating agencies other than the TBTA. As you know, the proposed fare changes have been the subject of lengthy public hearings and public debate. The Finance Committee has reviewed and recommended the adoption of these fare increases. We greatly regret circumstances require us to act on the package of fare increases as substantial as they are. But the law requires MTA to operate on a self-sustaining basis. We simply will not be able to balance our budget without adopting these fare increases. In the absence of increased external financial assistance that we have sought but have not yet been able to obtain. Accordingly, I request the board's adoption of the resolution on page 3 of the Fare and Toll Increase book. Adoption of this resolution will allow the MTA to make the tariff changes described in Attachment A to the resolution. And now may I have a motion to adopt the resolution? May I have a second? Okay, discussion. Who wants to talk first?
Can I just ask should we talk on both the fare changes and service at the same time, or are you going to call for talk at another time?
Every vote's going to be separate. You all have the option of talking about all, none, each, whatever you choose. This is the fair one. So anybody would like to go, I'll give you as much time as you'd like. Jim.
Mr. Chairman, my definition of politician was a public servant. I think our friends in Albany have lost their way. I want to thank at this time our leadership, Dale and Lee, for challenging this board to exercise our fiduciary responsibilities in a loud and vocal way. I don't believe this board has ever been as unified or as focused on an issue since I've been here, and that's been 15 years. I also believe that the fight is not over. As Lee has indicated, we will be back here. We were back here looking at the deficits that have crept up since we projected a deficit in December. And probably most important, and that is our capital program. Our capital program is as vital to this agency as the actions we're taking today. Because without a capital program, we can't deliver the services that we are required to deliver. Thank you.
Okay. Would anybody else, the next one's the environmental. Yes, Ed.
Yes. Mr. Chairman, I would like to take this opportunity to comment on your remarks on transparency. First of all, though, before I do that, I would like to commend you for your attendance at many of the meetings that have been held. However, although you may feel that the MTA has been malaligned for having two sets of books, I would suggest that there have been two sets of meetings that you and I have been at. And I say that because there has been discussion on three very important topics there where I feel there has not been transparency. First, if you refer to the Finance Committee, you can see on page 4 of the minutes of this book that were approved today that there are discussions that have been started and have been abbreviated or avoided. And there's been information that where people have been stunted, discussion has been stunted and silenced. Second, there has been much discussion on some of the failures of the capital construction projects. So we have had waste and problems, whether it's Stillwell or 100th Street or Grand Avenue, where we have inferior products, and yet there is no structural changes to address that waste. And lastly, through the presentation on these very fare and service cuts, and through clever manipulation of the English language, it has been this board's position that should Albany grant all of the financial relief requested, that there would not be service cuts. And yet, cleverly hidden in the budget are such service cuts. And that will guarantee that the MTA continues to rate just below Bernie Madoff in the trustworthiness of the people who ride the system. Thank you.
Would like to go next before I call a vote? Alan?
Mr. Chairman, 17 million eyes are now on Albany as we undertake the action that we're about to embark upon. And having been given no alternative but to do the things that we're doing, I will unhappily cast a vote for this. But the folks in Albany who are looking at this debate need to understand there are a couple of fundamental truths here. And fundamental truth number one is that this action is precipitated by a structural funding problem, a problem that is born out of declining revenues, largely through the real estate industry, that have totally collapsed,
that have created a hole which we cannot meet without Albany's assistance. They are the ones who created this formula. At the time, everyone thought it was a good idea. They need to revisit it, and they need to refinance the way that they finance this system. So that's fundamental truth number one. Fundamental truth number two is the capital needs of this agency can continue to be met by past practices of just borrowing and essentially financing equipment and projects, as Lee mentioned before, on the basis of a credit card. The governor recognized these fundamental truths a year ago. He created a commission, the commission chaired by Richard Ravitz, who has done heroic work in this area. Is not a perfect product, by all means. There are a lot of things in it that make us all unhappy, but unfortunately, the art of governing, you're going to make people unhappy in order to achieve a greater good sometimes. The governor has exercised his leadership by advocating for this. The Speaker of the Assembly has also exercised his leadership in essentially modifying the original proposals and making it more amenable and making it more workable for the members of his institution to actually pass it in that House. So now, hopefully, the third leg of the legislature, a third leg of Albany, the other house of the legislature, will get to where we need them to get. And as Lee Sander, our executive director, said before, I'm also hoping for optimism, because the riders of this system and the users of this system need us all to be as helpful and as cooperative in this effort in helping the legislature find a way to rescue a system that we all have spent so many hours of our lives, and some of you here, Jim, 15 years of his life to trying to protect and preserve, and does not want to see destroyed by the inaction of Albany. So I will end this by saying that I would hope that those who are not involved in this process as intimately as in the debate to at least give pause before they exercise political rhetoric and take the public off of these fundamental truths because they're seeking either partisan or political advantage in this political silly season. There's too much at stake here for all New Yorkers, and I would hope that the wisdom and the smarts that I know exist in the people making this decision, together with our continued cooperation and assistance to them in whatever help they need in finding a way to prevent this from happening, will occur. So I will unhappily vote for this proposal, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Al. Carl?
Yes, I agree wholeheartedly with what Commissioner Capelli said, and I don't think that there's anybody on this board who is not going to have to make a very tough decision today. I hope that the press really reiterates and says what we're saying here and trying to convey to Albany, so that they really get the picture. We're in difficult times. It's difficult for our riders. It's difficult for the board members, and I'm sure it's as difficult for the people in Albany. But I concur, and it's Albany's responsibility. We're here because of them, and I just wish everybody good luck.
Thank you. Norman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a very tough decision to make. Although I think that if we vote this down as board members, certainly Billy Moran is not going to haul us off to jail for not passing a budget right now. So I think we have some time. The mass transit system is not a luxury. It's a necessity for the men and women, the children, the seniors that travel this city and this state. The MTA spent hundreds of thousands of dollars and put out a beautiful sign that says, if you see something, say something. Well, with the cuts that we're making, who are you going to tell it to? Not going to be anybody there to say something to. They're going to be out there by themselves. We really need to look at this. Albany, the legislators on both sides of the aisle, the governor and the mayor. The mayor makes a public statement saying, we're mad as hell, we're not going to take it anymore. Well, that statement should have been made 3 months ago. And I love the mayor, great guy. But this is business, this is not personal. Malcolm Smith had a conversation with him yesterday by phone. Told him about the 10% occupancy tax on visitors coming to this city. Hotel tax. He said, Norm, that's a great idea. Well, if it's a great idea, let's make it happen. Let's take the public off the hook. Right about now, there's someone, as we speak, losing their job. There is someone, as we speak, trying to figure out how to get to put in an application for a job. There are people in this room that will lose their job by the end of the week. Guaranteed, one person in this room loses their job by the end of the week. When the shoe is on the other foot, then you'll feel the impact of it. We cannot, absolutely cannot, make this happen today. We can buy some time and vote it down. And I know the board members, each one of us has our own conscience to do what we're supposed to do. But when I took on the responsibility to do this and was asked in the Senate, would I speak for those who cannot speak for themselves, I said yes. I am not going to go along to get along. We must not pass this at this point. We must force the envelope to the edge of the table and let those responsible in Albany do their job. Because at the end of the day, they're going to walk away from us and they're going to say, see, they didn't need us anyway. And all of the things that we talk about, or at least that I have talked about with advertising, I have talked about tobacco tax, I have talked about the sin tax, I've talked about everything, and it's not a good idea. But I'm a betting man. After this budget is passed, they will come up with those same taxes and use it for their pet projects. And the public will still be on the hook. So I ask again, if you see something, say something. To who? There will be no one there. It jeopardizes public safety. Cutting those bus routes in different parts of the city. How is that parent or that senior or that individual supposed to get to the hospital, to their next appointment? How are they supposed to survive? Now this poor woman who's probably in her 70s has to walk 20 blocks, 15 blocks. Even if it's 5 blocks, that's 5 blocks too many. So I respect my colleagues in their opinions, but I must vote no on this issue at this time. Thank you.
Susan.
I think where we all hoped we'd never be. But time is not on our side. We heard in the Finance Committee meeting on Monday that we're continuing to see the loss of tax streams. Mr. Chairman, in your opening remarks, you commented on the steadfastness of some of the organizations who supported us, who understood the structural funding issue that Alan raised. And I have to tell you, many of them were here today, and they continued their steadfastness. In fact, I think they stuck their heads out even further today than they have in the past. But the story that plays to me is not what the advocacy groups or the bad financial record tells me. It's all the people who came to the hearings, the 20,000 individual stories, family stories about what this was going to do to them, and how sad that makes me for the MTA and for the city and for the state. I only wish that our legislature could somehow see that hearing transcript, read those letters, or listen to those people, because then they'd understand exactly how awful this situation is. Nonetheless, time is not on our side. We're continuing to struggle, and we have to do what we can. If someone sends us a lifeline, a lifeboat, we'll make those adjustments that we can so that people are not hurt, as they will be. But as of right now, I think we have a responsibility to see that this system is not bankrupt, and I'm proud to make a vote in that favor. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Susan.
I think we have no choice, as most people know, but the public doesn't know. We have only a limit in what we can do and what we can't do. And we're facing a very severe problem which will hurt the public in many different respects. However, to think that Albany, who has had many, many months to know where we are and to discuss the situation, to have absolutely no interest in their constituents, whether they're Republicans, Democrats, or Independents, and only want to play political games, to me is a farce. And I think it's up to them to come through in some form of helping our financial situation so that we can reduce the potential fares to the public and hopefully keep our service intact. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else right now? Andrew.
I was going to wait till the...
You got 4 other votes, Andrew. You can wait.
I'll wait. I'll wait till the service part.
As one of the rider representatives, I would like to note very as forcefully as I can, excuse me, the riders the riders contribution to the operation of this system. The riders in this MTA system contribute more on a percentage basis to the operation of their system and to the region's system than any comparable system in the nation. Our riders do more than their fair share, and that must be recognized in discussions such as this, so that when we have inaction from other responsible funding partners and the implication that our riders are somehow free riders, we need to disabuse them of that. Our people do their fair share, and they deserve the support of our funding partners, both on an operating basis and for the necessary capital to keep this system viable, as has been described so well by both our board members and also the public that spoke here today. And I hope that we give our riders the credit that they are due.
Thank you, Jim. Anybody else before I call the vote? Yep.
Mr. Chairman, this is a very sad day for all of us, especially for many of us who have been involved in this system for over 35 years. Your 1982 story was absolutely correct. There were a few people in this room who were there, Gary, Susan, myself, who helped create this system and made it keep going in a way that was necessary for this region. And to see a system that all of us have wanted to have expanded, detracted and decreased, and its costs go up is very, very unfortunate. I've been a strong supporter of this system for over 35 years. I've wanted to see it expanded. East Side Access is one. The railroad has great plans to be a predominant player in this region and unfortunately is not going to be able to do that. The people I really feel sorry for are the people of Long Island Bus, the riders in Nassau County who unfortunately through a confluence of events, including Nassau County's unwillingness to do what they were responsible to do, are going to be faced with a fare increase far higher than everybody else's. While I feel bad for everybody, I feel worse for them, because many of those people who ride that system do not have an alternative on how to get to work or how to get to where they're going. And I would hope that the reality of Long Island Bus is not lost in the larger discussion about the transit system and whatever. Sometimes our smaller entities kind of get lost in that discussion. But to many people, that system is as important, if not more important, than the subway and bus system in the city in that regard. As one of the few people who voted against the last fare increase, I think it's important for me to point out that at that time I did not think we had done everything we could with the state legislature, and that's why I voted no that time. That's clearly not the case today. The members of the state legislature, the governor's office, and everyone else have known for many years, and this board has known for many years, and obviously from the financial situation for the last 6 or 7 months, that this day would come at some point. It just happens to be today. Our federal government, notwithstanding the claims of one of our speakers, has told the mass transit systems in this country, and especially in New York, that we don't care about you. You are not a high enough priority to spend money on to save the fare. And that's very unfortunate when I agree completely. The easiest way to save the environment and the quickest way to save the environment in this region is to put people on mass transit and to keep them there and to get them out of their car. We can do that tomorrow. It's going to take us 10 years to build the first windmill, assuming we can ever build one in that regard. That's the most immediate environmental benefit that we can get, and there is absolutely no money from $787 billion that we can spend on that. And that's the unfortunate occurrence, the first of these occurrences, and now we wait for Albany to decide what priority is the mass transit system in our governmental structure. We know what the priority is of the people around this table, unfortunately, and that's why I reluctantly are going to vote yes for these resolutions, not because we want to, but because, in my opinion, we have to show the priority that we believe this system will be, so it doesn't get worse than it might get if we don't vote yes. And that's the only way I look at it. If we don't vote yes, the system will get worse than voting yes. And that's the unfortunate set of circumstances we have come to. We would hope this day would not come. We would hope something else could occur. But unfortunately, we are where we are at the moment.
Thank you, Mitch. David?
Commissioner Pelley, I echo your thoughts, and it's just unfortunate that we have to make this decision today. I regret the legislature has not acted to help us. I only foresee a backward trend if we do not vote for this budget today. And no one wants to go backward. We want to go forward. So hopefully there will be a lifeline and we'll be able to continue to progress. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeff?
A lot of people have said a lot of things, so I don't want to repeat them, but it's more than unfortunate that we're here today. It's actually a travesty that we're here today. This is an opportunity, and this is a time where many people, whether it be in Albany or here in the city, are pointing fingers and suggesting, well, we didn't know this was coming, or they can do more. I think what's pointed in this is you can probably triple our advertising revenue. You could probably cut, I think, as Lee said, all of MTA headquarters, and you wouldn't make a dent into the problem that we have. And the problem that we have is something we've been talking about on the operational side for a better part of, I'd say, 9 months for the moment. Ever since we release our preliminary budget 6 months in July, and we look at it monthly. So this isn't anything new, and it's a travesty that people can say that it's new, or we didn't have these books, or there's 2 sets of books. But what's also more important, and although we've talked about the operating budget over the last 9 months, what we're also faced with is a capital budget that this board and our mayor has talked about for 2 years, which is our next capital plan, a 5-year capital plan, is unfunded, and that you need to lay the system and the groundwork for building our infrastructure, or it's going to have an impact on the operating budget and it's going to impact our city's growth. For 2 years we've been talking about the capital plan, and what scares me and what can possibly happen, which scares me, is that Albany may come through, and they may come through in time for these fare increases not to go into effect, if in fact they come through and the board rescinds its decision, which I believe we still have the option of doing. But what scares me is that they'll come through with what's politically expedient, which is make sure the fare hikes don't go into effect today. And then they can say, see, we stopped it from happening. And 2 months from now, when I can guarantee this board will be back saying we need to do more cuts and more fare hikes because they did not address the systemic problems of this board and this agency, the MTA, which is not only dealing with our operating budget, but dealing with the long-term capital plan. That is necessary. Otherwise, we're going to be right back at this. We will be back in 2 months saying we still have a problem if they just do the politically expedient thing, not the right thing.
Thank you, Jeff. Mark.
I would just like to emphasize one aspect of the action that is before us today, which I don't think is, in fact, a political statement. It's a very practical statement. We're responsible to make the trains run. I think that people have, I guess it's kind of nice, faith that, in fact, the gate will be open and you will go down and get on the train, and the train will come and take you where you want to go. Or you'll get on the bus and it'll take you where you want to go. And there are benefits and problems with the service. Obviously, reducing the service is going to inconvenience lots of people. Raising the fare is going to be very difficult for lots of people. But our paramount responsibility here is to actually have the money to pay the salaries for the people, to pay for the electricity to turn on the lights and run the trains, to buy the bus fuel, and it doesn't automatically happen. It only happens if you plan and provide for the cash that you have to keep this system open and functioning. And what we are asked to do today is to take the next necessary step that we've spent a lot of thought and struggle with in order to make certain that, in fact, we will continue to be in a position to run the trains. It's not political. It's actually very real and practical and necessary at this time.
Thank you, Mark. Nancy.
If it was up to me, and I speak also for my fellow board members, we would all like the fares and the services to remain the same. And sort of to mirror what Mark said, we do have the responsibility to maintain a safe, high-quality transportation system. Regretfully, without the deserved government funding, we are left no choice. And I and we sympathize with the public's issues and concerns. And we do plead with those in Albany to do the right thing, to, stealing your phrase, to rescue transit and help the city and its region. Thank you.
I'm going to go.
Andrew, you couldn't resist.
Yeah, might as well join the group.
Go ahead. Have fun.
You know, it's, as several speakers have mentioned, it's pretty unbelievable that we've come to this place in time. In the state and in the city with 2/3 of the transit users in the entire country. I mean, who would have thought that places like Chicago and Philadelphia would just be raising fares but not cutting their service? But that's what's happening while we're talking about draconian service cuts. And there's a lot of blame to go around, but the people around this table are not the ones who deserve the blame. They've been dealt a bad hand by the dealers in Albany, a really bad hand. And I'll talk about the cuts while we're on it. The cuts that are in this book that we all received, this is not cutting fat. This is cutting well into the bone. Anybody that's had a chance to look at these, the booth reductions and the bus removals, and it's just, this is going to make New York a very, very different place. And it's not going to be as welcoming a place in any way. There's a real irony for those of us that sit on the various committees and we see the procurements that come before us month after month, and they're in the millions of dollars, or in some cases hundreds of millions of dollars. There's always money for those, but there's not money for our service. That's a great irony. Perhaps we should invite New York City Transit, Metro North, and the Long Island Railroad to submit bids so that we can procure service, so that we can give the service back. Maybe we should do it that way, because something is obviously not working. Anybody that's had a chance to look through these books and knows the system as I do, knows these cuts are not equitably distributed. Some neighborhoods are going to take it on the chin a lot more than other neighborhoods. With that in mind, I made a proposal the other day to change the bonus and to buy back some of the service cuts. It wasn't favorably received, so that's not going to happen. But at least I tried to do something to, to ameliorate the pain. Now, there's some questions that we need to ask. When the booth agents are cut and access is changed at all of these stations, and you can't get in on certain sides if you have a walker or an oversized package or an armful of presents at Christmas, how are those folks going to get into the system? Are the agents on the other side, have they been notified that they're going to have to look after the people on the other side now? I mean, is the union even aware of that? Who's going to be there for the customer's safety and security? Are intercoms going to be installed in these places in time for these changes? Has anybody asked these questions yet? Does anybody care about these things? When there's nobody around, as Commissioner Seabrook said, maybe we should change our motto. If you see something, don't worry about it. There's nobody left to tell. This isn't funny stuff. When people don't feel like paying these new rates and they abandon the system, what's going to happen? Are we then going to look to cut those routes further? When the 5 stations in Lower Manhattan and 2 in downtown Brooklyn are closed and people don't know if their stations are open and patronage declines on the R line, are we then going to look to come back here and cut the R line in future meetings? Are we going to go to like 300% seated load if things don't work out? I mean, where does this end? How will our children learn the alphabet when the only trains that are left are the A, B, E, and F? I mean, it's crazy stuff. My advice, because things look so terrible and things, as you heard from a few speakers, are likely to get worse the next few months, maybe we ought to all go out and ride a subway now while we still can. This is a totally unacceptable situation. The Z and the W train going away, I feel like I'm losing members of my family. There's a lot of people responsible for this debacle, but they're not the ones sitting around this table. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Who else before I do a vote on this one, before I go to the second one? There'll be another opportunity, I promise. Okay, if there are no more votes, I'd like to have a vote in favor. I want a motion to adopt the resolution. We had that. We had a second. We had discussion. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Norman. Okay, we got that? We all set? Okay. We're on to the second one. This is the environmental one.
Mike.
The next two items relate to the proposed increases in crossings at the TBTA bridges and tunnels. The first of these two action items for the board concerns the environmental review of the proposed crossing charge increases for passage of the facilities at the TBTA. You've all been provided with copies of the environmental assessment that has been conducted of these proposals and proposed toll increases. Based on that environmental assessment, the board is asked to adopt a negative declaration. This resolution is on page 61 of the Fare and Toll Increase Book. Adoption of this resolution will adopt the findings contained in the negative declaration attached to the resolution and authorize the President of the TBTA to execute, file, and publish the negative declaration. May I have a motion? May I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Anybody opposed? Norman's opposed. Everybody else is for it. We got that. Okay. Number 3, authorization of crossing charge increases. Our final action item relating to fares and tolls is the board's adoption of the resolution on page 115 of the Fare and Toll Increase Book. Adoption of this resolution will allow the TBTA to take all necessary actions to implement the crossing charge schedule attached to the resolution. May I have a motion? May I have a second? Anybody want to discuss this one? Alan.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. One of the things that's been pretty remarkable to me about this board is how each of the members have been appointed, in essence, by, or many of the members have been appointed by different people. And you've got at least 3 governors, maybe 4 different governors who have appointed members of this board, and different county executives and different mayors who have made recommendations to this board, yet the board has operated, in my view, as a fairly cohesive group of people coming together to deal with a common crisis. And I think that that's a tribute to your leadership, Mr. Chairman, and to Lee's leadership as our CEO. In joining the board, I've taken the approach that each of the counties that we represent are my counties and my responsibility, and have seen that from each of my colleagues, whether it be the residents of or the constituents in Long Island Bus or Metro North or the Manhattan crosstown routes. I feel the pain, and I've listened to the public hearings, and I think and agonize over the decisions that we're making on geography that is not necessarily proximate to where I am. However, on the subject of tolls, I'm required to take a different, not a different role, but I need to speak a little more parochial. I am a Staten Islander, and I'm very dismayed by the discussion in Albany about the Ravage proposal and the idea that tolls are okay in one part of the city and they're not okay in other parts of the city. The people that I live with and that I shop with and are forced to deal with a toll that is now going to go to $13 a day as a result of the action that we're taking. And I'm going to vote for it because we don't have a whole lot of choice here. But at one time there was a notion, at least in the city, that it was one city, one standard, and that the people in Staten Island should not be forced to be tolled at a greater rate than the people in Brooklyn or the Bronx or in Manhattan and going in the other direction. And God help the people in the Rockaways who are going to be forced to pay tolls to go within the intercounty. And that there is a structural inequity in the way that the city conducts tolls. And I know that there are some people who think that these bridges are great cash cows for the operating system, and they do produce a lot of revenue, but they also have a very negative impact on the lives of people, particularly in areas where there is no public transportation to speak of, and there are no real public transportation options. And then the combination of those with express bus fares for people in Staten Island, there is no quick way to get into Manhattan, and these are not luxuries. These are necessities that impact on people who are struggling to maintain their mortgages and to maintain their lifestyles. And so when we take these actions, keep in mind that many of the people that we're imposing these tolls on or these fares with the express buses have no other choice. And we not only have a responsibility to our subway riders and our bus riders in other parts of the city, and I will be there and help everybody exercise that responsibility to the best of my ability, no matter what part of this region that it's in. But I would hope that as we go forward and we make decisions on capital allocations to build transportation systems or for services, provide mass transit in other parts of the state, or other parts of our region, which include the Richmond County, the borough of Staten Island, that I get that same attention. And I know from working with my colleagues here that I will get it, but I did want to make that commitment to each of you that I will continue to be there and to make that statement to the public that we cannot just blindly go and raise these tolls without looking at how it affects everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Al. Anybody else on this one? Norman.
Yeah, I think one thing that, in Albany, one thing that came across in talking to the very few leaders in the state senate that are carrying a ball here, that there's a perverse incentive implicit in everything we're doing with the TBTA stuff here, that but the fact that we retain these free passage bridges, mostly in Brooklyn and 59th Street Bridge, East River crossings, to the extent those remain free, and MTA has no control or benefit from those bridges, it just simply means the tolls on the other bridges and tunnels are going to go up faster. So many of the people who consider themselves spokesmen for the drivers in the outer boroughs and run that up their flagpole are really punishing those people that do have to use the Verrazano and the Throgs Neck and the Whitestone and the Midtown. And there really is no such thing as a free bridge. And in my neighborhood, I live in downtown Brooklyn, love the neighborhood. But in many ways, we have become a doormat for people who do not want to pay the tolls at the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel. And I'm very disappointed at the Brooklyn delegation, and in Brooklyn, especially downtown Brooklyn delegation. Politicians who supported tolling these bridges for 20 or 30 years have now decided, maybe because they have aspirations of citywide office or whatever perverse thought is going through their brain, that now they're going to oppose these very same tolls. And it's been a sad thing. And the sadder thing, of course, is that the railroad does not run on tracks, it runs on money. And they're starving the very system that feeds the economy of this city. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Norman. Would anybody else like to talk on this one before I take a vote? Okay. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Norman's opposed. Are we all set on that one? Okay. Here we go. Additional actions for budget balance, major service changes. It completes the fare and toll actions. We're now turning to the action items set out in the 2009 AABB major service change cut. Everybody, of course, knows what AABB means, of course. As you know, the board adopted in the 2009 budget at our December 2009 board meeting. A 2009 budget contained a package of additional actions for budget balance. The implementation of the service-related additional actions for budget balance contained in the 2009 budget was subject to completing the necessary environmental reviews. You can tell a lawyer wrote this. Our first action item relating to the AABB therefore concerns the environmental analysis that has been completed. Specifically, the board is to act on the adoption of the proposed negative declaration concerning the AABB. You now have all been provided with a copy of the environmental assessment that has been conducted on the additional actions for the budget balance and upon the negative declaration is based. Board adoption is now sought of the resolution on page 3 of the 2009 AABB Major Service Change Book. Adoption of this resolution will adopt the findings contained in the negative declaration attached to the resolution and authorize the MTA Executive Director and Chief Executive Officer, that's him, to execute, file, and publish the negative declaration. May I have a motion to adopt the resolution? Can I have a second? Okay, now we get to the discussion. Who wants to discuss this one? Doreen.
Not only is this a sad day, it's a shameful day, because this wonderful transit system that we operated that reached into so many corners of far-flung neighborhoods throughout the city is being very badly compromised. I grew up in the country club section of the Bronx, and the BX14 is on the cut list. I took 3 different buses to get to high school, and I know how isolated that community is. I also remember Ken Parr from the Woodlawn section of the Bronx talking about the incredible hardships that are going to be imposed on the Woodlawn community by the loss of the BX34. And this is a story that gets repeated throughout all of the boroughs. It's a really shameful day. If this were a game of Clue, with the MTA laying bleeding on the floor from multiple stab wounds, we'd all be asking ourselves who's the culprit. And the fact of the matter is there are a lot of culprits. It's very sad that at the national level the priority has now been tipped towards roads and bridges and away from transit. And that we who operate one of the greenest transit systems in the country buy expensive fuel to make sure that we're not giving people asthma problems from our buses get absolutely no credit for that. The state Senate, the leadership of the state Senate is new, and I really and truly want to give them the benefit of the doubt and believe that they are not out to make the mistake that their predecessors made about a decade ago, when in a cynical deal with the greedier elements of Wall Street, came up with a plan to take all the bills that were coming due under their reign and push them onto our shoulders. That's one of the major reasons why we're sitting here. I'm happy to say that we're out of financial gimmicks and cheap tricks. There is nothing left on the shelf to restructure. The problems that we're facing, we all have to have the courage to tackle. And I believe that in the end, they are going to exercise that leadership and not do the things that their predecessors did. I also think, though, that the public also has to help out. In looking at the transit budget, I see that we spend $250 million cleaning up after the bad apples that use our system and either deface it, brand new subway cars with narcissistic nonsense on the windows that takes millions of dollars to repair, or leave food on cars, buses, and subway tracks and invite rodents and fires. $250 million. Imagine what we could have saved if people would clean up after themselves. There's a lot to be done. There are people on this board that are going to be looking at what else we could do, and I think we're going to have to, at this point, butcher some sacred cows around here to try to find more money because there is only more pain and suffering coming down the road this year if Albany doesn't act. I'm praying they will act. But in the meantime, all of us have to hope and expect that leadership is going to come through with a formula that works.
Okay, anybody else before I do this one? There's one more to go after this. Okay, can I have a vote, please? All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Norman. Okay. We got that? All right, we're going to do the last one of these. Then we're going to get to the committee reports. Okay. In addition to undergoing environmental review, the major service changes and subway station changes contained in the AABB were listed in public notices that were subject to the public hearing process. That hearing process now having been concluded, the Board's action on the proposed major service changes, subway station changes, and related matters contained in the 2009 budget is sought. The resolution in question is contained on page 31 of the 2009 AABB Major Service Change Book. The adoption of this resolution will allow the MTA Executive Director and Chief Executive Officer and the MTA Chief Financial Officer and the presidents of the MTA agencies to take the necessary steps to implement the service changes, subway changes, and other actions as described in the resolution in the attachment of the resolution. All of these actions were previously reviewed by the Board committees in November and December in connection with the review and adoption of the 2009 budget. May I have a motion? A second? Okay, last one to talk about it. Alan, you're up first.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'll try to be brief. A lot's been said. I just wanted to add to Commissioner Albert's comments. I didn't support him, his call at the Finance Committee to change the formula because I was afraid that it would bring the whole FAIR plan into legal challenge. But I do want him to know, and I state this publicly, that of all of the injustices that are being perpetrated today, the service cuts are amongst the worst. And I intend to work with him and with other members of this board who believe that restorations, if money does come through, need to be looked at very seriously. Thank you.
Thank you. And David?
I've heard many of our board members speak today. Again, this is regretful that we don't have a lifeline, but no one has mentioned the people that we're going to lay off. Not only are we going to give service cuts, how are the people going to survive to add to the debacle in our economy as well? We definitely need some help. I hope Albany hears us and we can resolve it and restore the service and give the people of Nassau a break as well so that they don't have to add to the burden. And of course, Staten Island is facing a heavier burden due to the toll increase so heavily. But we have no choice, and hopefully we can avoid all of this shortly. Thank you.
Anybody else? This is your last chance, so forever hold your peace on this side of, we're going to get routine stuff. Anybody? Anybody? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Norman, record Norman, please. Anybody else? Thank you all. Now we're going to get to the more routine parts of the meeting. We'd like a report of finance. Jim Sador is going to be doing it for Andrew Saul. Jim, you're up.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to present the following items for the Board's approval. There's one information item this month. Included in the Board's material for informational purposes only is a copy of the annual prompt payment report. This report is required by statute and must be filed with the State Controller and others within 90 days of the end of the MTA fiscal year. Are there any questions? Thank you. There are two action items. First action item requests board approval to file with the State of New York the annual MTA All-Agency Procurement Report for the period January 1st through December 31st, 2008. The report was distributed separately to the board. Can I have I will move this action. I ask for a second. Second. All in favor?
All in favor.
Aye. Second action item, request the adoption of the resolution on page 41 of the board book for the purpose of adopting the MTA agency personal property disposition guidelines and appointing the staff persons listed in attachment A to the staff summary contained in the board book as the personal property disposition contracting officers for purposes of section 2895 to 2897 of the Public Authorities Law. I move this action, and I ask for a second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? So moved.
There are two procurements totaling $28,546.41. There is one non-competitive procurement in the same amount. The committee recommends this procurement, and I move it.
Second. All in favor? So moved.
There's one competitive procurement to award $0 contracts to 4 collision repair companies. The committee recommends this procurement, and I move it.
Second, please. All in favor? Anybody opposed? So moved.
There are no ratifications this month. Mr. Chairman, this concludes the Finance Committee report.
Thank you, Jim. Well done. Doreen, please.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. First, could I just ask if we could get Hillary and Michelle to try to schedule a few more meetings up in Albany for board members that want to continue going? Our work up there is not done.
I'm sure they would be thrilled to comply with that request.
Thank you very much.
And
On behalf of
now we don't have to put our snowsuits on. We might get more of us even to come up.
On behalf of the Transit Committee, I present the following for the board's approval. There are no action items. There are 20 New York City transit procurements totaling $73,700,000. Of that number, 6 are non-competitive in the amount of $32,700,000. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
Second, please. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? So moved.
There are 10 competitive procurements in the amount of $37,650,000. The committee recommends them, and I move them.
Second, please. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? So moved.
There are 4 ratifications in the amount of $3,300,000. The committee recommends them, and I move them.
Second, please.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? So moved.
With regard to MTA Bus, there are no action items and no procurements, and this concludes the report.
Okay, thank you, Doreen. David has a bathroom break. Jim, would you take over Metro North now, please? Skip David. We'll get back to him. Oh, wait a minute. Wait. Hurry. It's your turn. Don't want to go out of order.
Nature calls.
Nature calls, absolutely. All right, Long Island Railroad and Bus. Let's go, David.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning.
The Long Island Railroad Committee met this month, and there are no action items. There are 8 procurements totaling $39,793,000. The non-competitive, on the green pages, there are 2 non-competitive procurements in the amount of $6,038,000. The committee recommends these procurements, and I'd like to move them.
Second, please. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? So moved.
On the competitive procurements, on the yellow pages, there are 6 competitive procurements in the amount of $33,755,000. The committee recommends these, and the procurements, and I'd like to move them.
Second. All in favor? So moved. Anybody opposed? So moved.
Ratifications, on the pink pages, there are no ratifications. And I'd like to move to Long Island Bus. There is 1 procurement in the amount of $96,000. It's a non-competitive in the green, and no non-competitive. Competitive procurements in the yellow pages, there's 1, and that's for $98,000. And I'd like to move it.
Second, please. All in favor? Anybody opposed? So moved.
On the pink pages, ratifications, there are no ratifications. That concludes the Long Island Committee.
Thank you, David. Jim, you're back up.
Mr. Chairman, the Metro North Railroad East of Hudson trains operated at 97.8% on-time performance in the month of February. I'd like to present the following items for the board's approval. There are no action items. There are 9 procurements totaling $8,138,053. Of that number, there are 4 non-competitive procurements in the amount of $855,000. The committee recommended these procurements, and I move them.
Second, please. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? So moved.
There are 4 competitive procurements in the amount of $7,248,053. The committee recommended these procurements, and I move them.
Second? Second. All in favor? Anybody opposed? So moved.
There is 1 ratification in the amount of $35,000. The committee recommended this procurement, and I move it.
Second. All in favor? Anybody opposed? So moved.
This concludes the Metro North Committee report.
Thanks, Jim. David, you're back up.
Good morning again, Mr. Chairman. The Bridges and Tunnel Committees met this month, and there are no action items. There are 4 procurements totaling $3,215,000. In the non-procurements, green pages, there's 1 non-competitive procurement in the amount of $1 million. The committee recommends this procurement, and I'd like to move it.
Second, please. Second. All in favor? Anybody opposed? So moved.
On the competitive procurements, in the yellow pages, there are 3 competitive procurements in the amount of $2,215,000. The committee recommends these procurements, and I'd like to move them.
All in favor? Anybody opposed? So moved.
In the pink pages, for ratifications, there are no ratifications. This concludes my Bridges and Tunnels Committee report. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, David. Nancy, please.
Capital construction, there are 2 competitive procurements in the amount of $325,380,000. The committee recommends these procurements. I move them.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? So moved.
There are 3 ratifications in the amount of $37,034,000. I move them.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? So moved.
Regarding the real estate portion of the meeting, the committee reviewed and recommended a total of 9 real estate items for board approval. The committee recommends them, and I move them.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved.
And that concludes.
And I'd like to announce to the relief of everybody, there is no executive committee meeting today, so we don't have to clear the room. I just need 1 motion to adjourn.
Motion made.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you very much. This meeting is adjourned.
Good job.
Thanks, Paul.
Okay, here we are.
How bad is this? It's pretty bad. It's certainly not where we want to be, and unless Albany comes to the rescue with a plan, these increases are draconian, as we've talked about before, and the service reductions are going in exactly the opposite direction of where this organization needs to go. And on top of that, without the funding for a capital program, we now begin to move down that slippery slope of the 70s and 80s in terms of disinvestment in our capital program if they do not come through with a capital program, funding for a capital program.
I think the other way to understand it is every single person who rides or uses the system will be effective. That's how bad it is. Nobody is going to feel as if it hasn't affected him or her every single day that they use the system.
I also neglected to mention layoffs, and that is also extraordinarily unfortunate that we will have to go down that road as well.
Would you be happy with a dedicated year-after-year funding stream that was not toll-based?
Look, we have supported the Ravitch Commission recommendations that I was on, and that remains our strong preference. We leave it up to the leaders up in Albany to come up with what they think is the appropriate policy outcome for the MTA. It begins to become more expensive, more difficult to do. We begin to take actions in May against our commuter, with our commuter riders, for those who get their tickets on the internet.
and then other actions take place with other riders. June 1st is the hard date in terms of when they go into effect on our transit system. So you really have the month of April before people get impacted. You could reverse some of those actions in May, but they will already start taking place in terms of hitting our customers.
I think it was Norman Seabrook who said that, if you see something, there are posters up saying, if you see something, say something, but who are you going to say it to, given these cuts? Can you tell us, is that true? What's the effect going to be on the customer service agents? Will there be no one to say anything to, and isn't that a problem in and of itself?
Well, there will be fewer people in the system. There will be fewer customer service agents. That is a group of our employees that will certainly be impacted. Also, bus operators in particular will also be a class of employees that will be hit in terms of layoffs as this proceeds. And we certainly would not want to have that kind of a reduction in our program. There are different categories, and we can speak more specifically. Howard, do you want to speak to how this set of reductions will impact the presence of station agents?
Yeah, no, I think what you heard is that we will have one man token booth in each station, but in many cases that means cutting 2 or 3 man 24-hour booths that are there now, particularly in the larger stations.
Yeah, that refers to the second and third classes I was referring to.
Rich Lamb, CBS. Now that you have actually passed the fare increases, the toll hikes, and the service cuts, do you expect the pressure to build on the lawmakers in Albany to give you something to fix this?
Do you want to do that first?
I don't know if we expect to. We sure hope it will. I mean, it's now a fact. It's done. It can only be undone by actions that they'll take. So we sure hope the pressure will build.
Do you urge riders then to call or email, to send mail to their, especially to the Senate or to anybody else?
Yes, we do. We think it is important for the public to make its voice heard with their elected officials. Sometimes in the fog of Albany, the impact of these reductions, of these increases, of these layoffs doesn't come completely clear. The impact in terms of the future of the region, in terms of its economy and environment. And so we certainly urge New Yorkers to reach out to their elected officials and impress upon them the importance of what we're dealing with here, the impact on New Yorkers and the future of our region.
I think the trouble is that so many of our riders work every day, bring up families, they're very busy, they don't focus on all this. And that's why I said it was so important in my open remarks for you people in the Fourth Estate to bring that to everybody's attention. I mean, most New Yorkers are so busy with living their everyday lives, they don't get involved with the political process. And if there was ever a time we'd urge them to do it, it's right now. Everything helps.
Could you explain again why you had to take this action today? Because I think the folks out there are a little bit confused because Albany's late with their budget all the time. So why can't you?
We are required by law to have a balanced budget, and you need a certain amount of time to get these actions done by June 1st so we can balance our budget. We have a deficit in our budget, and these actions are required to close it. There is the period of time that is there now for them to act, but we need to begin this process now. Otherwise, bottom line, we wouldn't be able to balance our budget by the end of the year.
It's not only balance the budget, we wouldn't have cash to pay the bills, so we have to have the money coming in to pay the bills. Albany doesn't have a law that requires them to pass the budget at any specific point. They decide when they're going to do it. If they don't do it, they can pass continuing resolutions and all sorts of other things to keep it going while they get a final resolution. We don't have that. We have to pay all our bills, and we're tight with money now, so if we don't start putting in all these fare increases and service cuts, we literally won't be able to pay our bills at some point by the end of the year.
That's right. In addition, one other point is that we have, as has been noted, $20 billion or so of commercial paper that's out there, and our ratings will be impacted, which has an impact of tens to hundreds of millions of dollars potentially on us if we don't balance our budget.
Can you speak specifically to Long Island Bus? Mitch Pally mentioned that Long Island Bus riders are going to get hardest of all, and because they're in a bit of a different situation with the funding problem in Nassau County, what will it take to kind of pull them out of the fire?
I agree with Mitch. I think that the Long Island Bus riders will be particularly hit hard because of the decision of Nassau County to limit their support for Long Island Bus, and we've made up the difference in the past. We can no longer do that, and as a consequence, they are going to get hit particularly hard. The Ravage Commission recommendations would have dealt with that, would have been helpful on a regional basis in terms of the issue of the county support, and certainly our fervent hope would be that any solution from Albany, whether it's the Ravage plan or any other plan, would deal with this issue of the subsidies from the counties and ensuring that the bus riders, and as Mitch noted, in places like Nassau County where we run the system, Westchester where we don't, that the customers of those systems are particularly lower middle income, and this will hit them particularly hard, and we are very upset about that.
Lee and Dale, the fiscal crisis continues to hit the economically sensitive taxes that continue to fund the MTA, and there was talk today that these are going down. So my question to both of you is, how soon do you think that you will have to, if Albany does nothing, how soon will you have to come back to this boardroom and demand more cuts and more fare hikes, and how ugly will that be if you have to deal with that kind of crisis?
Well, it will be, it could well be soon, potentially in April. We have been talking about this in our Finance Committee with the presentations made by Gary Delaverson, our CFO, and, we are not pleased with the numbers that we're seeing, and we could come back. Had the Ravage plan been passed, we would have had more capacity to deal with this issue, and now without it, we are more hard-pressed.
If these numbers continue to go down, are you talking more service cuts? Are you talking more fare hikes? I mean, what does it mean?
I think that the problem with your question is you're causing us to speculate, and I don't think you want us to really do that. I think we all have to see what the numbers are, and then we'll come back and tell you what we can do. Speculation is not good. Of course we're worried. That's why we're talking about it. That's why Gary talked about it in the Finance Committee meeting. But to actually answer your question, what are we going to do, we really have to get a much better handle on what it really is, and the numbers could change, and you don't want us to speculate. That'll just frighten people. We don't want to frighten anybody. We want to do the best job we can with the information we have. We don't have enough information right now. When we know what the hard facts are, we're going to tell everybody. We just don't know enough, and we're not certain enough, and we don't want to scare anybody, and we don't want to speculate.
But the reality is we will be back soon.
Yep. Figure April.
Can you comment on the suggestion today of a rider boycott, one-day boycott to demonstrate to Albany and to the board the anger about all this?
I'm not sure that would do the trick. I'm not sure that would have an impact. I would certainly like to see expressions of anger and concern back, but I'm not sure that a boycott would do the trick. An interesting idea, though. Maybe we're too much in the mobility business to see the wisdom of that one.
We're not French either.
Yeah.
Too much.
Lee, I've looked at your capital program oversight committee book, and it looks like there's money in the past two capital plans even that hasn't been spent yet, and I'm assuming you haven't quite bonded out on that yet, or at least some of it. I'm sort of wondering, if you don't have a capital a budget stream coming in, are you going to stop? What's going to be the effect? What are we going to see? Are you going to stop? Are you going to stop bonding out because you don't have a way to pay it back? Or are you going to, how long can the money that you do have in reserve or you do have authorized, how long can that take you in terms of when we actually see work being stopped?
Those are the actions that we're looking at now. Linda Kleinbaum of our staff, who leads that, has begun looking at that frame. Obviously, we hope not to be in this place, but we are there now, and so we will be looking at all of that. Our strong feeling on a preliminary basis, obviously, is that we're going to protect the core program. And so that is that is certainly our primary commitment, and my sense is that we would be hard pressed to walk away from it. But we will be back to you programmatically in terms of whether there are any variations to that. And
just put it this way: is anything in the 0509 plan that's been passed actually in danger?
No. That is our definition of core program that needs to move forward, and that is not at risk. But as we prepare a new capital program, if we do not get the kind of funding that we need, we will have to analyze whether there's any way to narrow it, and it's not clear that there is, quite frankly.
What exactly was the problem with the suggestion that you reduce the bonus to save some service cuts? Why was that taken off the table?
Gary, do you want to speak to that?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't describe it as being taken off the table. There were two options that were presented publicly and that the board considered. One had a change in the bonus structure. That was option 2. And the first option, which the board did adopt today, did not have a change in the bonus structure. So it's not so much that it was a choice, right? So the issue that Commissioner Albert raised had to do with the change in the bonus structure, in which that would disturb the proportionality of option 1. So not to be boring about it, option 1 was designed to have the increase to be roughly similar to all customers, whether there were single rides, bonus users, or weekly, biweekly, or monthly. And so option 1 was designed to be that. If you reduced the bonus from 15% to 10%, the amount of money that part of our customer base, which again is more than a third, would be much greater than that of our other portion of our customer base. So therefore, it was different than the theory of option 1. So that's fine.
Thanks.
Great, thank you.
Okay.